They were built to change heavy transportation forever, to challenge every industry standard, and to show the world what the trucks of the future would look like. They had bold design, cutting-edge technology for their time, and promises big enough to impress any manufacturer on the planet. But behind all that ambition were problems the public almost never got to see. How did three groundbreaking projects manage to disappear before they ever transformed our highways? Some ran into insane costs, others arrived way too early, and a few simply couldn't prove that all that futuristic technology would actually hold up in the real world. On this journey, we're going to look at three trucks that seemed destined to make history, but ended up remembered for failing instead. Stick with me until the end, because the last truck on this list was one of the boldest attempts ever made to reinvent what a truck could be. Steinwinter Supercargo 2040. This story starts back in the 1970s, when German engineer Manfred Steinwinter, running a small vehicle conversion company in Stuttgart, patented an idea that sounded completely insane for any traditional manufacturer at the time. While giants like Mercedes-Benz were still building conventional cabs mounted ahead of the front axle, Steinwinter pictured something totally different. A truck where the driver's cab sat almost underneath the trailer, nearly level with the tires themselves. It took years of development alongside a small team, including designer Axel Brunn, who would later go on to work at Renault, before the concept finally took physical shape and was unveiled to the world in 1983 at the Frankfurt Motor Show in Germany, under the name Supercargo 2040. In fact, the name itself told you exactly what the project was about, since the number referred to the maximum overall length of 20 meters and 40 centimeters the combination could reach while still complying with European road regulations. A detail that shows just how much thought went into every inch of that truck. Underneath that impossibly low hood sat a Mercedes-Benz sourced diesel V8, the OM422, an 8-cylinder engine putting out 400 horsepower and more than 2,000 Newton-meters of torque, more than enough muscle to haul heavy loads with ease. That power ran through a long manual gearbox with 16 speeds, built by ZF, designed specifically to give the driver fine control in any road or load condition. The suspension was air-sprung and fully independent on all four wheels, with rear-wheel drive, anti-lock brakes, and an automatic locking differential, a set of technologies that was rare for any truck of that era, let alone a project that never even reached full-scale production. The look alone was enough to stop people in their tracks. The cab stood barely over a meter tall, lower than plenty of sports cars from that same period, and the tractor unit itself measured just under 6.5 meters long. Inside, the driver sat in Recaro seats, in a low reclined position more like a luxury car than a truck, surrounded by instrumentation and trim that looked closer to an automobile than the bare-bones cab of a typical rig. And there was even a small bed next to the passenger seat along with air conditioning, a luxury practically unheard of in trucks of that generation. On the front bumper, the prototype carried the emblem of a rearing horse, inspired not by Ferrari, but by the coat of arms of Stuttgart itself, Steinwinter's hometown. The practical idea behind all that boldness was simple. By drastically shrinking the space taken up by the cab, every meter saved could be turned into extra cargo room, allowing combinations up to 18 meters long and a cargo volume of more than 150 cubic meters, a capacity gain of up to 50% compared with a conventional truck of the same overall length. At the same time, closing the gap between the tractor and the trailer improved aerodynamics and promised real fuel savings. The project was so flexible that Germany's Vehicle Inspection Authority, the TÜV, actually approved the same chassis to operate in 4 different configurations, as a standard articulated truck, a heavy-duty tractor, a rail-linked combination, and even a bus, just by swapping the body on top. That kind of versatility caught the attention of rival manufacturers too, including the Dutch brand DAF and Japan's Isuzu, who both followed the prototype's testing closely in Europe and the United States. The trouble showed up exactly where nobody expected it, in the cooling system. With the engine crammed into such a tight space under the cab, airflow was never sufficient, and overheating became a recurring headache during road testing, which added up to more than 3,000 kilometers driven, on top of the poor visibility that low seating position forced on the driver, something the test drivers themselves flagged as a real disadvantage on the job. Mercedes-Benz, which had backed the project by supplying the engine and chassis, eventually pulled its support, and traffic laws at the time didn't even clearly account for a truck shaped like this one, which made any real shot at mass production practically impossible. In the end, only a single unit was ever built, and that historic prototype remains largely abandoned in Germany to this day. Even so, the Supercargo 2040 was never forgotten, and it's still remembered as one of the strangest and most visionary trucks ever built for the road. Did you enjoy learning about this piece of German engineering audacity? Go ahead and drop a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit that bell, because the next project on this list trades extreme aerodynamics for an even more radical bet, straight out of the aviation world: Ford Big Red. The same year Ford unveiled the Mustang to the world, the automaker also introduced something completely different from anything that had ever hit the road at the World's Fair in New York City. Nicknamed Big Red, the project was born inside Ford's scientific research laboratory under engineer Roy Lunn, and it had a goal every bit as ambitious as its name suggested: to show America what the super highways of the future and heavy freight hauling would look like in an age powered by aviation technology. The heart of this mechanical beast was a gas turbine, the Model 705, originally developed by Ford for military and aerospace use, the kind of engine that up until then had only ever been found in tanks, helicopters, and jet aircraft, never inside an actual truck. That turbine delivered 600 horsepower and nearly 1,300 Newton meters of torque, raw force capable of hauling not one but two trailers at once without breaking a sweat. Unlike a conventional engine, this turbine had no pistons and no cylinders moving up and down. Instead, a spinning chamber continuously drew in, compressed, and burned air, sending all of that force through a transmission system engineered specifically to handle the unique behavior of this kind of propulsion on the open road. The suspension was AIR ride, designed using real wind tunnel data, keeping the whole rig stable even though the combination, tractor plus both trailers, stretched past 29 meters long and stood over 4 meters tall, a genuine road train weighing in around 10 tons. Visually, Big Red was as jaw-dropping as it was intimidating. A massive red cab with a ground-level door instead of the narrow ladder found on cab-over trucks of the day, letting the driver simply walk in rather than climb up to the controls. Inside, the structure was all steel and comfortably sat two people in a space that felt more like a luxury camper than the cab of a freight truck, complete with a full kitchen with hot and cold running water, a private bathroom, and even a television for the long hours on the road. In practice, Big Red toured the entire country on a promotional run through cities like Boston and Philadelphia, hauling both linked trailers as a true early version of what we would now call a double trailer rig, proving to the American public that you could carry twice the freight without sacrificing comfort or performance. One Ford executive at the time summed up the spirit of the project perfectly, calling Big Red a concept vehicle straight out of the company's product research office, making it clear this was first and foremost an exercise in imagining the future. And it is remarkable to think that decades after wowing crowds across the country, this 10-ton giant simply vanished off the map. The last public record placed the truck in the hands of Holman Moody, Ford's former factory-backed racing team, stored inside a warehouse in North Carolina, at least through the late 1970s, at one point even listed for sale as surplus. After that, Big Red disappeared completely, and it wasn't rediscovered until decades later, well into the 2020s, when investigative journalists finally tracked down its whereabouts and Ford released archival footage of the project. The reason behind its commercial failure had nothing to do with a lack of engineering talent and everything to do with market reality, new environmental regulations beginning to take shape across the United States, the enormous cost of mass producing an engine of that scale, and the fact that turbine-powered vehicles face different requirements from state to state, which made any real manufacturing plan simply unworkable. Ford wasn't alone in taking this risky bet. since around the same time both General Motors and Chrysler were also pouring resources into the idea of putting jet turbines on wheels, but none of them managed to prove the technology made sense outside the sky. Even so, Big Red became a legend among collectors and automotive historians. The ultimate symbol of an era when the industry dreamed bigger than the technology of the time could actually deliver. Hang on tight, because the next truck on this list also holds quite a story about just how far engineers were willing to go in the name of progress. Chevrolet Turbo Titan III. While the Germans were experimenting with extreme aerodynamics and Ford was betting everything on military aviation, General Motors had already been chasing a similar obsession for almost 2 decades, just on a different scale. It all started back in the 1950s, when General Motors engineers developed the turbine engines that would power the legendary Firebird concept cars, named GT302, GT304, and GT305, each one more advanced than the last, gradually chipping away at the fuel consumption problem that had always been this technology's biggest weakness. That same research path led in the following decade to the Turbo Titan I and Turbo Titan II truck prototypes, 2 test vehicles that logged many thousands of miles on real highways and proved the technology had real potential. It was only after gathering all that experience that Chevrolet, General Motors' heavy truck brand at the time, revealed the Turbo Titan III to the public in the United States, the most ambitious and most realistic result of that entire 15-year research program. In fact, a year before this launch, General Motors had already wowed crowds at the New York World's Fair with the Bison, an even wilder sibling equipped with 2 simultaneous turbines producing a combined 1,000 horsepower, one reserved for cruising speed and the other just for climbing grades and heavy pulls, along with 4-wheel steering and modular cargo containers that anticipated the intermodal shipping we use today. That project, however, never actually drove under its own power and had to be pushed into position just to pose for photos and ads. Turbo Titan III, on the other hand, was 100% functional. Under the direction of designer Bill Mitchell, the same man behind the look of the Corvette Stingray, GM's team built a cab-over-cab out of fiberglass and steel with an electrically operated tilt mechanism and prominent air intakes on either side of the front end to feed the turbine. In place of a piston engine, the heart of the Turbo Titan III was the GT309 gas turbine, nicknamed Whirlfire Turbo Power by GM itself, spinning at more than 35,000 revolutions per minute and geared down to 4,000 revolutions per minute at the output shaft, producing 280 horsepower and nearly 1,200 Newton meters of torque, which climbed even higher as the engine cooled down. The real technical breakthrough on that turbine, which GM branded Power Transfer, was a variable clutch system developed jointly with Allison, capable of routing part of the compressor's power straight to the output shaft, which improved fuel economy under partial load and, more importantly, delivered engine braking 2 to 3 times more effective than a conventional diesel truck. A single regenerator recovered more than 90% of the exhaust heat, dropping exhaust gas temperatures from over 900 degrees Celsius at the turbine outlet down to just over 260 degrees at the tailpipe, finally solving the overheating issues that had plagued the earlier Firebirds. With no pistons or cylinders to speak of, that power ran through a 6-speed automatic transmission built by Allison, shifted with a console lever borrowed from a production Chevrolet, while the truck rode on a conventional rear-wheel drive chassis, pulling a custom 12-meter trailer built entirely of polished stainless steel for a combined gross weight of more than 34 tons. Visually, it was something nobody had ever seen on American highways: a massive panoramic windshield, side windows that swung up electrically, slightly tinted glass to help the air conditioning work more efficiently, headlights that tucked away into the body, and in place of a normal steering wheel, a system GM called Twin Dial, using 2 spinning discs the driver used to steer the truck as if piloting a spacecraft. Inside, the so-called astronaut seats were upholstered in leather, suspended, and fitted with integrated headrests, rounded out with an FM radio, a 2-way radio phone, retractable seatbelts, and special gauges just to monitor the turbine's behavior. This giant's real job was touring the entire country on coast-to-coast promotional runs, repeated several times, proving the turbine could handle the rigors of long-haul freight in any climate, and it could even run on different types of fuel, including kerosene, offering a level of flexibility that was rare for its time. At a steady cruising speed, fuel consumption came close to matching a standard diesel, but outside that narrow operating window, efficiency dropped off fast, a problem no engineering team of that era ever truly solved. It went on to become one of the boldest symbols of the automotive turbine era, featured in period ads under the slogan "The Chevrolet Way," right alongside Chrysler's turbine car and the direct rival Ford was building with Big Red at almost exactly the same time. In the end, General Motors' own engineers admitted the turbine was brilliant in the air, but simply didn't make sense spinning on four wheels on an ordinary highway, stuck in traffic, climbing grades, and stopping constantly in ways no turbine of that generation could handle efficiently. Sadder still than the project's commercial end was the physical fate of the prototype itself, which according to records from the time was dismantled and destroyed by the late 1960s, leaving behind only photos, brochures, and a handful of promotional films as proof that this monster on wheels ever really existed. 3 projects, 3 different countries, and one shared lesson that dreaming big is essential to moving an industry forward, even when the present isn't ready to keep up with the future engineers like these dared to imagine. 3 trucks, 3 countries, 3 completely different ways of trying to reinvent freight transportation, and yet the same fate. The Supercargo 2040 bet that less height meant more space and more savings. The Turbo Titan 3 bet that the power of a jet turbine could rule the highway. And Big Red bet that the future of heavy transportation was coming straight out of the sky. None of them lacked ambition or engineering talent, and that's exactly why these 3 machines still fascinate people decades after being abandoned or scrapped. They aren't just prototypes that failed, they're physical records of a moment when the industry decided to bet everything on a vision of the future, even knowing the risk of failure was enormous. Now tell me in the comments, which of these 3 trucks did you have no idea existed before this video? Which of these technologies would you like to see actually running today? And if you could bring back just one of these projects, which one would you choose? If you enjoy this kind of content, go ahead and drop a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit that bell. It really helps the channel grow because it shows YouTube our content is worth sharing with more people. New videos on the most ambitious projects in transportation history drop every week. See you in the next one.